New poll from the Manhattan Institute finds New York mayoral candidate Andrew Yang first choice with 19% of voters, just 1 point ahead, though, of candidate Eric Adams. However, Adams narrowly pulling ahead of Yang on the final ranked choice ballot, projected 52% compared to Yang's 48%.
This news comes as the city prepares for the first election using ranked choice voting. Team Rising is here to weigh in. Democratic strategist Andrew Feldman and culture editor at the Federalist, Emily Jashinsky.
Two great friends of the show. It's good to see you guys. Emily, let me start with you. It's kind of fascinating because it feels like it's not a precipitous drop. There have been other polls which have shown actually Yang in third place, but he seems to have suffered in recent weeks. I'm not sure if it's necessarily on the Israel thing or if it just was the clumsiness in which he handled it. What do you make of just the final tightening, I guess, in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I guess there's a question as to whether Yang suffered or his opponent was increasing, right? Like, was there a boost for his opponent, or was it really Yang making any mistakes? I don't know that I've seen anything from Yang that I think would actually be meaningful with the small slice of the New York City population that's actually going to go out and vote in a Democratic primary.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens. Yang obviously has the built-in advantage of name recognition, and you really can't underestimate that in politics. It's a little bit different in a primary when you have a smaller slice of people actually voting. But when people get into that booth and they see a name that they know, and Andrew Yang has high favorability, he also has high unfavorability in that Manhattan Institute poll. You could see, something interesting that puts him over the edge just with name recognition alone. So I'm curious as to how this shakes out, but it's always hard to tell when you have these very marginal differences.
So, Andrew, I've got a question. I don't think any of us who work in Democratic politics 6 months ago would have said, yeah, there's a chance of Andrew Yang being the mayor of New York City. How did we actually get here? What's your opinion on that?
Look, we got here just how we got with Donald Trump. To be honest with you, I mean, this is a wild card candidate. This is someone that comes out, not from politics. He started a real movement in the presidential race, and he's continued that here in New York City. The problem here is no one really knows where he stands. And he doesn't feel like a traditional Democrat. That may help him at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, it also could come back to bite him. His comments early on about the teachers unions, his super PAC that is funded by Donald Trump supporters. I think there are some real vulnerabilities here, and people do not know, what to actually expect and what they'll actually get from Andrew Yang.
Yeah, this is the thing I've been struggling with, Emily, because from anecdotal evidence and from a lot of polling that I've seen on Yang, it doesn't really have much to do with UBI. They're just like, I like the guy. He's nice. And he has a different affect than traditional New York City politicians. And I wonder whether his handling of the Israel thing and then the backpedaling just smelled a bit like a traditional political pander and then a pullback. And that, if anything, had less to do with the substance and just the way that people conceive of Andrew Yang, the politician.
Yeah, it's possible. I think that's actually a very interesting theory, because that issue is super, super animating for voters, for some voters, not for all voters, but for some voters, that's something they're really passionate about. And it's the kind of thing that if somebody stumbles, could get them to the polls or could get them not to the polls after they had planned to go there. And so I think that's an interesting theory. I mean, you saw that with Donald Trump sometimes, but it's when people see somebody that's fresh and looks like they're not political, and then they do something that acts political, that can really hurt them. We're still sort of kind of new to watching that all play out, whether it's with Trump or Yang or whomever. But I like your theory.
So, Andrew, one thing that may be at play here is we've seen in recent polling that public safety is a big part of what people are primarily concerned about in New York City. It's the highest polling issue by far. And Eric Adams was a police officer. How much do you think that has to do with what we're actually seeing here in the race tightening between the two of them?
Look, it's an important topic right now across the country, not just in New York City, but the idea of not only safety, but racial justice. That definitely, I think, could have a role here, especially just reminding folks, as we have the anniversary of George Floyd's death, that could be a moment in this race. And you'll see, I think, again, my issue with Andrew Yang is no one actually knows where he stands. So at the end of the day, when people go into that ballot box or early vote, will they actually pull the trigger for a candidate who is really a wild card? That is the question here. I think New Yorkers have to decide upon. But the bigger thing here that's fascinating to me is Bill de Blasio is one of the most progressive mayors in New York City history and recent memory, and we are seeing that voters are not craving that. They are not craving another Bill de Blasio. They're not craving someone who is far left, and that's fascinating based on what you're seeing across the country in some of these primary races.
Yeah, really insightful, guys. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe you'll still win. We'll figure it out. Can be back with some rising.
Anyone does.
Yeah. All right, stick with us.